Disclaimer: it's been a year since I finished Bastard, and I skimmed through the manga while doing my research, so I probably forgot something important or misremembered an event. This video discusses major plot details of the series and contains some content that's not suitable for younger viewers, so you have been warned. Imagine this situation. You live in a world of sword and sorcery. 15 years ago, your kingdom was invaded by an incredibly dangerous wizard and his army, hoping to conquer the land. Upon his defeat, he was sealed away inside the body of a young child and everything's at peace once more. Eventually, invaders return and things are looking grim. Your people are surrounded and the fall of your kingdom is imminent. You only have one option that might result in your survival. The sealed wizard must be released. But what will happen once he's free? Will he even heed the will of the people that he was trying to defeat all those years ago? There's no time to contemplate such matters, and you're all sure to die otherwise, so he is released. And that is Bastard, the Dark God of Destruction. Today I'll be discussing the plot, characters, and history of the series. Written and illustrated by Kazushi Hagiwara, and originally appearing as a one-shot titled Wizard, the Blazing Conqueror, in Weekly Shonen Jump on November 2nd, 1987, the series made its appearance as Bastard in the same magazine on March 14th, 1988. It tells the story of Dark Schneider, an incredibly strong magic user trapped in the body of a young boy who was orphaned due to the aforementioned battle that occurred 15 years ago. His name is Luce Rinrin. Ruche Linlin? I was not entirely sure how you'd spell his name with Latin characters, and according to the official romanization from the data book, it's actually Rusi Rinrin, but this is the same book that writes defensive spell like this, so I'll be anglicizing a lot of names and terms. Back to the point, DS can only be freed once Luce receives the kiss of a virgin, transforming his body into that of the wizard stuck inside of him. Why exactly does Luce have the soul of a 400-year-old wizard sealed inside of him to begin with? During the battle 15 years ago, DS was about to die, but cast a reincarnation spell prior to his defeat. Before he could completely take over the body of the boy, Geo Nort Soto, a priest from Metallicana, the kingdom where the story begins, used his magic to prevent Dark Schneider from taking over Luce's body completely, and set the seal that prevents him from escaping and doing whatever he wants. In order to make sure the child could be kept safe, Geo adopted him and raised him as his son. Geo's daughter, Tiara Nort Yoko, is very protective of Luce since she views him as her younger brother. As such, when Metallicana is invaded by Osborn, an evil magician, she is very reluctant of breaking the magic seal that would release Dark Schneider from Luce's body. Desperate and realizing that they will die without the power of incest, she kisses her brother and lets out Dark Schneider. From there, the plot mostly follows the misadventures of DS as he finds himself in servitude of the people he once sought to conquer. Due to his rebirth, he is different from his old self. While still a lecherous, cynical, malicious, and violent man, he will now show mercy to some foes due to the influence of Luce's gentle nature on his body. This is also why he does not betray the people of Metallicana. Because Luce loves Yoko, Dark Schneider also loves her and will do as she wishes. Along the way, he meets up with several of his old allies, many of which show disdain for him since they view him as a traitor now. As the story progresses, more and more of his former allies decide to join his cause and fight for the people of Metallicana. However, all is not as it appears in this world. An ancient evil entity, Anthrax, is lurking in the shadows, gathering power, and her followers wish to revive her. In fact, the whole reason that the former disciples of Dark Schneider were attacking Metallicana again is because they were looking to break one of the 4 seals placed on Anthrax, and one of them happened to be there. These people believe that if they break the seals and release her, they can control Anthrax, and thus have control over the entire world. This is a constant looming threat for quite a while in the plot, and many chapters revolve around the main characters trying to stop those that wish to revive Anthrax. The climax of the Dark Rebel Armies arc involves Abigail, one of DS's former allies, and also Anthrax's mental puppet, being defeated, but Dark Schneider apparently dying in battle against him and the body reverting back to just being Luce. This arc introduced lots of important characters, many of which ended up being my favorites throughout the whole series for one reason or another, or at least leaving a strong impression. Many would probably consider DS to be an unlikable protagonist, but I find his antics very entertaining. Sure, he's a bit brash and very cocky, but that's what makes his actions so hilarious. At the same time, he has displayed the capacity for sympathy and mercy if he likes someone enough, so there's more to him than just being a vulgar, rude guy. The Ninja Master Gara is another cool character. What I like about him is that his manner of fighting is somewhat unique. While most characters in Bastard rely on Western magic and or European weapons to battle, Gara mostly uses ninjutsu techniques and his Japanese blade, Murasame. Additionally, he has a group of ninja retainers that follow him around and act as secondary narrators, which I found really funny. As for his personality, he seems like the kind of guy that will do anything for his friends, so that's certainly a point in his favor. Arches is a bit of an annoying character at first, because of her blind belief in the creation of a sorcerer's kingdom that will eliminate all prejudice in the world, but she eventually comes to her senses. Her relationship with DS is a rather complex and troublesome one, adding more tragedy to her story and the early plot of her having to kill him to save her life from the curse of Accused. Some would argue that her being in love with her father figure is highly inappropriate, but from her perspective, I can understand it somewhat, seeing as how she was a mixed child of human and dark elf descent, making people unwilling to accept her. Dark Schneider was the man that saved her life after she was kicked out of her village, leading to her developing an admiration akin to worship. Furthermore, this kind of romance used to be fairly common in some cultures, and can be seen in numerous stories from a few centuries ago, such as the tale of Genji. Yoko seems a bit abusive towards Luce, to the point that I question why he tolerates her behavior. I don't dislike this character, but early in the story, I don't really care for a lot of her actions, and she is not as useful as she becomes in the later parts of the story. Before the next arc begins, we get an intermission that reveals that the world of Bastard is actually Earth in the future. A long time ago, Anthrax was created by humans to end war, but it went rogue and tried to destroy the entire world. Things were looking very bad for humanity, but then it was defeated by a legendary being known as the Dragon Knight. This does not have much bearing on the story at the moment, however. In the next arc, Hell's Requiem, the antagonist is Call Su, a sorcerer that Dark Schneider raised like a son. He has become the most devoted disciple of Anthrax after Abigail's defeat in the previous arc, and is referred to as the High King of Ice. Due to the loss of Dark Schneider, the beginning of this arc focuses more on Yoko. Luce has not transformed into Dark Schneider in years. This part of the story introduces a lot more characters on both sides. Joshua Baraya's group of samurai that assist Yoko, and Ingvai's sorcerer shogun that fight under Call Su. Unsurprisingly, DS returns later in the story to help fight against Call's army, leading to a bittersweet conclusion where he is finally beaten, but Anthrax is released from her imprisonment and unleashes her army of monsters as well. Most of the characters introduced in this arc did not stand out much to me, so I honestly could not tell the majority of them apart. The only character out of the sorcerer shogun or the samurai that I found really interesting is Makopine, since he decides he doesn't want to be evil anymore after seeing more of the world and hanging around Gara, learning about trust in the process. Then there's Call's story that gets revealed in this arc. Much like Arsha's, he is a child of mixed race that was ostracized for this. Rather than being half elf, however, he is half ice dragon, it seems. His mother keeps him, but is encouraged by others to murder him, so in self-defense, he has to kill her himself and then is adopted by Dark Schneider. He's an alright villain, and his return to Dark Schneider's side feels organic given the context of the relationship between the two. Now, up to this point, the story mostly follows the conventions of a traditional fantasy setting, with a few Eastern elements thrown in, such as ninjutsu. A good bit of what you see in the setting of Bastard as presented in the Dark Rebel Armies and Hell's Requiem arcs would not seem too out of place in something like Dungeons & Dragons or Fire Emblem. But once the Crime and Punishment arc occurs, science fiction elements are given more attention to explain the backstory of the world, and they put several things in the series into a new perspective. The legend from the intermission is expanded upon. The fantasy creatures such as elves and goblins that exist in this world are actually just genetically engineered life forms that were created in a laboratory 400 years ago. The reason that the world is so different now and that the old species like dogs and bears are no longer around is because the battle that occurred 400 years ago between Anthrax and legendary Dragon Knight Lucifer wiped most of the life on Earth out of existence. Even stranger than this, it turns out that the Dragon Knight is actually a suit of armor created by the 10 Wise Men of Europa, the same scientists that also designed Anthrax before she went out of control. By the way, the pilot of the suit of armor was actually an artificial human created by science just to pilot Lucifer. And his name? Dark Schneider, a bastard the darkness had born. If all of this was not already a shocking enough change to the story, a lot of theological elements are also added around this time. Dark Schneider engages in battle with Anthrax and appears to finally defeat her. In the process, however, he is hit with an attack that results in him being transported to Alcatraz space, a sealed dimension he cannot escape from. And while trapped inside this horrifying new existence, he meets Satan and various demons. In other words, he's just been damned to hell. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Anthrax reveals her true form, an angel sent from heaven, and her monstrous followers, those are actually her fellow angels. Their goal is to purge the Earth of sinful humans like they did 400 years ago. The reason that Anthrax went rogue in the first place is because it was used as a vessel for an angel to possess it, causing the behavior it engaged in. As expected, most of the characters are very confused by this strange turn of events. The only characters that know about what's really going on here are Call, Sue, and Abigail. The former can comprehend the transpiring events because he is familiar with ancient texts such as the Bible. The latter knows what's going on because he is actually one of the 10 Wise Men of Europa that use science to design the creatures of the current era. While the angels are purging humanity from the Earth, both Dark Schneider's allies and his former enemies are working together in unison so that they can defend themselves from the onslaught of the angels. The issue is that while all of this is happening, they are inside of King Crimson Glory, the airship of the 10 Wise Men of Europa, and it is about to crash out of the sky. The group is desperately trying to defeat the angels and find a way to safely survive the crash. At one point, Yoko is in danger of being murdered by an angel, but before this can happen, Luce appears in front of her as an astral projection of his true form. All this time, he was actually the human incarnation of Lucifer, the fallen angel that refused to participate in humanity's destruction 400 years ago and was banished from heaven for it. He informs Yoko and Abigail of the situation regarding DS being imprisoned and what they need to do to free him. The issue is that freeing him will require a massive amount of light energy, which they would need to overload the reactor of King Crimson Glory with to achieve. During this conflict, the Archangel Michael gives an explanation for the events transpiring. Angels were ordered by God to eliminate humanity because the species is inherently sinful. To explain this argument, the character gives a speech on how the kind of love that mortals feel is selfish and focused on one's best interests rather than what's good for all of humanity. The standards displayed by the angels are, of course, unrealistic for humans, but that's what makes them such interesting antagonists. They have a completely foreign way of thinking, and even consider the good guys of the story to be bad since they still have the potential for evil in their hearts that could result in them acting on it one day. This arc could have easily been the best part of the whole story if it weren't for the terrible lack of a conclusion here. As for the character developments and introductions, Abigail's reveal as one of the 10 wise men of Europa here surprised me, but I like this element being added to his character. He is already shown to be pretty smart with lots of technical know-how, seeing as how he invented the Angus persona and suit to hide himself in the previous arc. Satan is a very odd character in this series. He is supposed to be the main antagonist and the embodiment of evil, yet he is very over the top and silly at times. Lots of crazy erratic movements like he has a mental illness of some sort. Luce turning out to be the angel Lucifer was a really weird twist for me. From what I recall, there were not many hints about this at all, and then he is never seen again. Yoko's love of her brother is also never really addressed either. A bit of a disappointment. Around the time this was being published, something very important happened. Bastard was switching magazines. For a while, it had moved to Weekly Shonen Jump Special, a quarterly version of Shonen Jump. After that, it moved back to regular weekly Shonen Jump, but it was published on an irregular schedule. However, it was no longer going to be published in any variation of the child-friendly Shonen Jump. Bastard was moving to Ultra Jump, a monthly publication targeted towards older readers. As such, it would be allowed to cover more mature subject matter, and Hagiwara would have fewer restrictions in general since his work was no longer being published in a children's magazine. Unfortunately, there was a bit of an issue. The story skips forward by 4 years between arcs without much of an explanation, and moving from magazine to magazine had something to do with this. From what I've researched, and by research I mean skimmed Japanese Wikipedia, Hagiwara was mostly done with the original manuscript that would complete the Crime and Punishment arc. But due to scheduling and the series going back and forth between being in Weekly Shonen Jump Seasonal Special, and eventually making its way to Ultra Jump, several chapters never got published on time, and some of the missing manuscript had to be released as a doujinshi known as mishio, meaning unused. As far as I know, there is no official English translation or even a scanlation of it, and the only translation I could find was a Korean one. Now, this would be fine for those of you that know Japanese, but even the Japanese text is barely legible since it appears to be a rough draft version of the writing. As for the plot of Mishio itself, from what I could comprehend, it shows Dart Schneider still in hell fighting it with Porno Diano. Then he escapes from the battle and while exploring, finds Gabriel's Algoides, the form angels would use for battle. Meanwhile, the 10 wise men of Europa explain more about the origin of man, King Crimson Glory crashes, and the angels on Earth defy the laws of physics to perform a miracle in which they combine into one and release a massive beam to wipe out the stragglers of humanity. Even after finishing it, I still have more questions than answers, as a creature known as the Behemoth shows up, but I don't recall him being in any of the Immoral Laws arc. These missing chapters are being reworked into the current arc of the manga, but this endeavor has yet to be completed. Hopefully one day this will all come together and make more sense. As for the Immoral Laws, this was a very grim arc showing what happens 4 years after most of humanity has been wiped out by the angels. At some point, Dart Schneider and many demons have escaped from hell, though I'm not entirely sure how that happened. Armageddon, the previously mentioned war between angels and demons, has been raging for a while, and Satan is approaching the Earth at an alarming rate after wiping out the angels' fleet that existed around the center of the galaxy where the Gate of Hell is located. The other angels on Earth have been captured and sent to Cocytus, the lowest level of Hell, so the Archangels have to save them in order to increase their numbers. While on Earth, Uriel, Gabriel, Michael, and Raphael are tasked with eliminating the rogue demons roaming the Earth, and the remnants of humanity are caught in the crossfire between both sides. While some angels like Michael and Gabriel are more concerned with the demons than humans, the Archangel Uriel seems to still carry great disdain for humanity. Now, I could criticize this arc for barely featuring the old supporting cast or having a rushed setup due to the missing chapters and dialogue, but I have to at least give it credit for showing off much darker themes than seen before in Bastard. Despite the amount of content that some may consider objectionable seen in the earlier arcs, that is mere child's play compared to many of the events that you will witness in the Immoral Laws. The diabolical nature of the arc and the main conflict involves Uriel becoming a fallen angel. How did this occur? While scouring the earth of demons, the Archangel group comes into contact with a demon named Conlon, who appears to be undying. Even though they should be strong enough to utterly destroy all traces of his existence, he keeps resurrecting because human scientists, implied to be some of the 10 wise men of Europa, have incorporated the flesh of Uriel's sister Amariel into his body. This infuriates Uriel because he thought Amariel was already killed by Satan, so he views this as a desecration of her body, parading it around as a tool for a demon, mutilating her flesh for his own nefarious purposes. Forced to attack his own sister to save his life, Uriel began to feel like all of his work was for nothing and he has a crisis of faith. He starts to feel disdain towards God and begins to fall. During these events, Dark Schneider reveals his new ability in order to kill Conlon. He's acquired the Judas Pain and can now transform into Majin Dark Schneider. What does that mean? After betraying Jesus, his former disciple Judas felt so much guilt, his pain was solidified into a gem that grants the user incredible power. Though it was split up and the Lords of Hell managed to get most of the parts. It was not shown in any of the chapters, but he apparently stole the pains of Judas from the archdemons. After DS eats Conlon, consuming Amariel in the process, Uriel's fall is complete. As a fallen angel, he looks completely monstrous and wants to kill Dark Schneider at all costs. A massive battle ensues that takes up most of the rest of this arc. Elsewhere, it is shown that many of Dark Schneider's former allies are still alive and working to combat Satan's approach to Earth. Some are even watching his battle with Uriel. In the end, DS decides to just recreate Amariel's body at a cellular level so she can see Uriel again, making him come to his senses and return to his angel form. However, he has used up so much of his energy that he dies. After that, the other angels are just happy that the battle is over and that Amariel is safe. Once the dust has settled, DS finally meets back up with Gata. The future is looking brighter for humanity, and that's chronologically the end of the story for now. My biggest criticism of this arc, however, is that Uriel is not really much of a sympathetic antagonist, though the story is written in a way that makes it seem like you're supposed to feel bad for him for falling, as they show much of his tragic backstory. He hates humanity, and whenever fighting against rogue demons, he does not care how many innocent humans die in the crossfire. Dark Schneider also points this out in order to explain why he hates both angels and demons. Regarding the other characters, I found it weird how McAlpine is given so much focus as the human narrator of this part, but I didn't hate it. I just would have preferred another one of the stragglers from DS's group to be in this position. There was one final volume released after the end of the Immoral Laws arc, but it mostly consists of content from Michiel. The Tankobon of Volume 27 actually has some extra pages that were never scanned. The art was actually finished, and more of the plot from Michiel was worked into the story. This was released 7 years ago, and to my knowledge, no one has ever scanlated that part. A new chapter has not been released since then. Overall, while I initially did not like the addition of science fiction and theological elements to the story, as it shifted more towards Bangsian fantasy and horror, those things eventually began to grow on me. The changes didn't just come out of thin air either, as many of the elements in earlier chapters hinted at later events. I just did not put much thought towards them at the time. For example, in earlier chapters, DS can summon a golem, a creature from Jewish folklore. In another early chapter, Kai Harn attempts to defeat the vampire Diamond by using a crucifix. Both of these were signs of more Judeo-Christian themes to appear later in the story. Call's knowledge of the Bible is somewhat foreshadowed as well, since he is shown to be familiar with the events of pre-Armageddon Earth when he starts talking about ancient conquerors. As for science, Abigail displays his scientific knowledge during the fight between Call Sue and DS, stating that Dark Schneider can defeat Call since he already survived Absolute Zero, and that heat theoretically has no upper limit. The reveal that the story takes place in our world is also hinted at early on, since DS dresses up as Santa Claus in one chapter and asks to borrow 500 yen from Yoko in another. I thought these were just silly one-off jokes, but they actually meant something. Even if there were no missing chapters and the story flowed perfectly, I'd probably still be annoyed since major characters such as Gata and Arshas get dropped for too long, but I still must state that the missing chapter issue really took away from the experience for me. Lots of questions were left unanswered, and I feel like there is just something missing. The demon Lilith looks a lot like Yoko, and I initially thought that was her after turning into a demon upon death. But then you see a girl that looks very similar to Yoko working with the wise men of Europa, watching the battle between DS and Uriel. While I'm on the topic of generally confusing things, I found it odd how Satan is sometimes referred to as Lucifer, but is apparently not the same Lucifer as the one that guards Yoko. Back to the point, it almost feels like the Immoral Laws arc is an entirely different manga that just happens to have the same protagonist as the previous parts. That is not necessarily a bad thing, of course, and I wasn't exactly enamored with the early chapters to the point where I felt like nothing should be changed, but I still thought that some of the changes were a bit odd. A simple example of this would be the change to how magic works. Unlike mortals, demons and angels can cast spells without having to do an incantation. I assume to make battles go by faster, and eventually, even DS can cast spells without incantations if he is in his Majin form. The plot got a bit off the rails in the second half, but I enjoyed the experience and just wish that Hagiwara would write more. I was interested in finding out why new chapters were taking so long and made some interesting discoveries. Originally, I thought I was just in hiatus with nothing new occurring at all, but I found out that the series is in a situation similar to that of the 5-star stories, where it still gets new content and releases, just not for the main story. The manga has been re-released several times in new collections and with new covers, the last release of which was the Bunkobon collection published in 2014. On that note, Hagiwara seems to be a bit of a perfectionist. In some of the re-released Complete Edition volumes of Bastard, he redrew several panels to look better than his old art. The redrawn art from the Complete Edition was used for the out-of-print Viz releases in North America, by the way. While he will sometimes have to rush art because of deadlines, he will retouch it with the computer later to get the desired look. There are a few light novels as well, such as a guidance story about Gara and a prequel involving Gain Esperanza, one of DS's followers that served him in the past. None of these have been translated, though. Additionally, Hagiwara has drawn several pornographic doujinshi using his characters. I'm fairly sure these are non-canon for obvious reasons, but they stopped using the Virgin Kisses Break the Seal of Luce plot element years ago, so who knows. Either way, they're pretty entertaining, and it's nice to see DS and company again, especially with how the early plot of Sheila having to suck poison out of Dark Schneider's wound is reused for Expansion 2. The most recent entry in the Expansion Doujinshi series was released in 2017, so it looks like Hagiwara has not forgotten about the Bastard just yet. Only Expansion 2 has been translated, but maybe one day when I'm feeling generous, I'll pay a group to translate some of the other books. Hagiwara has also recently finished an art book, New 3, and it also has some Bastard content. It's only available on Torano Ana at the moment, but you can acquire it easily by using a forwarding service like jpshopping.jp. That's how I got my copy, and I would totally recommend the site. In general, the series has had a good amount of licensed materials produced over the years, even to this day. In 1992, it got a 6-episode OVA that covers most of the Dark Rebel Armies arc. It was supposed to be longer, but it never ended up getting finished. I heard it was because a key staff member got arrested, but I can't find a credible source on that. It's an alright adaptation, but I don't like how it moves around some events and changes them to involve different characters, diminishing the roles of others. Certain plot details are revealed earlier than I recall them being shown in the manga as well. I feel like the series has limited appeal in the West due to its only anime being an incomplete adaptation from 27 years ago. The manga may have sold 30 million copies in Japan as of 2008, but the series is sort of hard to get into if you only speak English, and I feel like a new anime adaptation would get more people interested in it. There have been numerous figures and other toys released by various companies over the years based on Bastard characters as well. Most of the ones I've seen look pretty good, but I only own one and can't really comment on the others. The series has also gotten some drama CDs, but I don't know much about those. As far as video games go, the pickings are rather slim in terms of quality. In 1994, the series received a video game on the Super Famicom. It's a primitive arena brawler that uses something similar to the lane change mechanic from Fatal Fury for a pseudo 3D effect, though the two combatants cannot be in the same lane. The controls are a bit hard to comprehend, so I had to get a patch from romhacking.net just to make the spells easier to execute. It's been fan translated and it has a story mode, but I did not enjoy the game enough to finish it. From what I've read, however, it diverges from the manga's plot around the end, and DS soundly defeats Abigail without appearing to die like at the end of the Dark Rebel Armies arc. Not a very good game. The only thing I really liked about it was the instruction manual. A real shame since Hagiwara seems to like fighting games, though I'm assuming that he did not have much say in this game's production. On the subject of fighting games though, Bastard was a large inspiration for Guilty Gear, so that surely counts for something. Kai Kisk is pretty much just Lars anyway. In 1996, Opus released the PlayStation game, Bastard, Utsuro Naru Kamigami no Utsuwa, which I believe would translate into The Hollow Vessel of the Gods. It's an RPG with first-person exploration, a strategic battle system, and an original plot. The encounter rate feels a bit too high and travel takes too long because you walk around very slowly in the overworld, so if you're going to play this, do it on an emulator with a speed increase function. I did not hate what little I played of it, but I don't know enough Japanese to fully enjoy the story. In 2006, Tecmo conducted a beta test for a Bastard MMO, but the game was never released. I assume it was cancelled because of the Koei Tecmo merger and the restructuring of the company that occurred around this time, but I have no proof of this. From what I've seen in screen caps and footage, it looks somewhat interesting, but I can't find much info on it now, and it was cancelled in 2009, so all I really have is archived info from its website. 2012 saw the release of a Bastard pachinko machine from Daxel. What I found most interesting about this one is that it features music from one of my favorite Japanese bands, the Sex Machine Guns. I had heard Pride and Death Game before, but I had no idea that they were used for this. In 2016, a Bastard mobile game was released by DNA. I can't find much info on this one, nor can I find any footage, and the service has been terminated, so I can't even download it now. But I did find a set of card images from the game. The series apparently has a lot of mobile game crossovers as well, with games such as Daisenran Sangokushi Battle, Sengoku Enbu Kizuna, and Kamigoku no Valhalla Gate. In 2017, another Bastard pachinko game was released, this time by Nugin. I don't have much to say about this one other than that I don't think the music I've heard from it fits Bastard as well as the Daxel games did. Also in 2017, Bandai Namco released Weekly Shonen Jump, Ore Collection. It's another mobile game featuring Dark Schneider. I could actually find footage of this one. This card battle game has you choose your favorite characters from throughout the history of Shonen Jump and make them fight against enemies in quests. It utilizes motion graphics for the special attacks characters have, and as you can see here, they chose Venom as DS's special move. In 2018, Konami released Weekly Shonen Jump GQ Junjun Stadium, and it's basically a Super Smash Bros. Clone featuring Dark Schneider as a playable character. Its service was recently terminated though, so I can't show you any footage of how DS played in this game. You know, I may have had my complaints about the Super Famicom and PlayStation Bastard games, but at least I can still play them, unlike the mobile games and MMO. The Bastard game that I enjoyed playing the most was actually Tony ADV's Mugen fan game. Some characters seem a bit overpowered, and a lot of the sprites seem to just be edits of sprites from other games, but I can appreciate the amount of effort put into the backgrounds and moves that each character has. They even use abilities from the manga and say the spells before using them. The lines are all in Italian, but I think I get the gist of it anyway. If you haven't read Bastard and this video has inspired you to do so now for whatever reason, there is a slight issue. Due to the series being out of print in the US, you will probably have to rely on scanlations to read the entire story, or pay crazy prices for secondhand copies of the English prints. Of course, the Viz version got cancelled after Volume 19, so you would have to read scanlations for Volumes 20 through 27 and the untranslated works anyway. Either way, Hagiwara makes no money from this. As such, I encourage you to go to his website and buy something from the international shop like an art book or a shirt if you feel like his works have positively impacted your life in some way. Good luck walking around with Bastard on your chest in some areas though.